I think that this discussion is potentially jeopardizing the credibility of our UFO community. I want the New Paradigm Institute to be providing a more stable analysis of what's going on.
My name is Danny Sheehan. I'm a constitutional litigator who's worked some of the most important cases in modern American history. From Pentagon Papers, the Watergate scandal, to Iran-Contra. My legal career has led me now to this pivotal moment. As our human family confronts the implications of the existence here on our planet of extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional non-human species. I will be your guide as we dive into the profound philosophical, theological, and public policy questions pertaining to the UFO phenomenon, alien life, and the citizen movement for disclosure. This is the Full Disclosure Podcast, coming to you from the New Paradigm Institute on SpectraVision Radio.
We are now still in the 9th or 10th week of the war against Iran. There are no active negotiations underway at the present time. The Straits of Hormuz remain effectively closed. There's no shipping getting through except for Iranian-approved vessels that the U.S. has not located and boarded. The gas is now up to $5 a gallon across the country, rising. It's up over $6 in California. Iran and the United States are both drifting. There's no active bombing going on by the U.S. against Iran, and there's no active military strikes being initiated by Iran against Israel. But Israel is, in fact, still engaged in active bombing into Lebanon against Hezbollah. April 26th, just 2 days ago, there was another major bombing into Lebanon by Israel, killing 14 people and injuring others. And Israel is bombing away into the southern Lebanon, setting up a new, basically no-go zone there for any Lebanese trying to basically annex southern Lebanon as an alleged buffer zone against the Hezbollah in Lebanon. So that is all still extremely unstable. Russia is still continuing to bomb into the Ukraine. Hundreds of people dying, being killed every day, in the fighting between the Russian soldiers and the Ukrainian soldiers. Basically like World War I trench fighting going on there. This is absolutely unacceptable, the conditions that are going on in the world. On the home front, we're still engaged in the major war going on between the Republican and Democratic Party, redistricting the states in which the respective political parties are in control of the state legislature. While the global situation is extraordinarily unstable, conversations continue with regard to AI. There's a basic conflict going on between the Pentagon and the major AI corporations, most especially Anthropic. They are refusing to provide their AI technology to the United States Pentagon because the Pentagon is insisting upon having it run automated lethal attacks. The Anthropic company that does Claude doesn't want them to do that. So there's a major confrontation going there. We will be addressing this in a later episode. I have just done a couple major interviews on behalf of the New Paradigm Institute, one with Deep Prasad, who's a major entrepreneur in Silicon Valley at the cutting edge of AI technology, that he and I are discussing the potential need to establish some sort of a juridical entity, some sort of a special court to be able to oversee restrictions being placed on AI because AI is approaching in the very near future potential personhood. The likelihood is, and I believe it to be true, Deep Prasad is concerned that the AI technology is going to be able to apply for a judicial declaratory judgment, declaring them to be a person in the same way that corporations were able to win their personhood to be deemed to have civil rights that prohibit restricting the free speech of the corporations, and in the case of the AI technology, restricting the ability to shut off an AI, because that would be effectively capital punishment, and that there would need to be due process provided to them. We're having these discussions with them. We'll discuss this at a later session. I've also just done a major podcast with Neil Gower on portals to ascension, along with Billy Carson, who has been advocating that we collaborate with AI, that we don't set up such an adversarial relationship with them to be able to subject them to juridical constrictions. That is available now, apparently, on the portal to Ascension. The chair of that, the host of that is Neil Gower, Gaur, under the Earth Ancients podcast. Okay, so but we'll discuss those things later. But there's a lot of increased speculation going on right now that, in light of the extraordinarily unstable situation that obtains on the global level, with the lack of any negotiations actually going on between Iran and the United States to solve the ongoing war, all there is a temporary ceasefire. In the Straits of Hormuz remain closed, that there's speculation that Donald Trump is going to utilize this situation to release some significant information about the UFO subject, trying to distract attention from his failure across the board on policies. His popularity among the American population has dropped now below 35%. 55% or more of the people in the country now oppose him and want him removed. And so that there's been a lot of speculation, somewhat pie in the sky, I believe, on the part of the UFO community that, well, maybe he's going to release the information about the UFO stuff in light of the fact that he has said he's going to do it on at least two major public occasions, and he has they reserved the certain internet domains to release information on that. They're speculating that he's getting ready to release this. I don't think that's true. I think that, releasing any of this information would be more distracting. He's not going to acquire a great deal of popularity from doing it right now in light of the plummeting levels of popularity that he's suffering from right now. We're going to have to continue the major grassroots organizing to compel this information out. And we're going to have to mobilize to give strength to the members of Congress who are attempting to generate UFO disclosure, such as Eric Burleson and Tim Burchett and others, Anna Paulina Luna and Nancy Mace and the others that are doing this. We have to encourage them literally. And as you all know, we're engaged in a very active campaign now of distributing these commitment cards, trying to get every single candidate for any House office of the 435 seats that are up for election and the 35 Senate seats, that we're asking that every single candidate, Republican, Democrat, Independent, or any of the other political parties, Green Party, Independent Party, Liberal Party, they all be confronted and asked to sign this card committing to support a full UFO disclosure if they're elected. There's been this kind of rising crescendo going on that's been generated mainly by the UFO disclosure community all around the continuing disappearance of General Mccasland. And people are now starting to add more and more people to this list of alleged missing scientists and nuclear weapons experts around the country. It's up to 11 now. I've spoken very briefly on this in the past, but in light of the fact that podcasters of the caliber of Jesse Michaels and people are now starting to participate in this discussion, I think that this discussion is potentially jeopardizing the credibility of our UFO community. That there's no rational connection on the part of eight of the 11 people. I want to talk about these people. I want the New Paradigm Institute to be providing a more stable analysis of what's going on. Four of the 11 or 12 people that are being talked about are of concern. Okay, what I'm basically saying is that of the 11 that are being talked about, eight of them are not entitled to a lot of attention and time. It's going to just lower the credibility of our community to keep on trying to attach them to some pattern of mysterious activity going on here. But I will say, to be very clear about it, the disappearance, the continued disappearance of General Neil McCasland is extremely puzzling and very concerning because General McCaslin, as you all know, is in fact one of the keepers of the secrets. He is one of the people who knows the most about what progress has really been made in the reverse engineering aspect of the UFOs and understanding what the technology is and what some of the technology is that's still being worked on and investigated, therefore making him a really prized catch. If any sinister foreign power or adversary of the United States were to take him into custody and interrogate him about this information, as I pointed out before, I'm astonished that a guy possessing the kind of information he has didn't have major security around him all the time. But the bottom line is he disappeared in February. Here we are now, all the way to basically the beginning of May, and he's still missing. And it's the lack of any kind of evidence at all about his disappearance that is the most suspicious of everything. With all of the cameras that they had, the surveillance cameras on both ends of the street that he lives on, all the different door cameras and everything all around and the massive search that's been undertaken for him, with all of the sniff dogs and the drones and helicopters and search teams, ground search teams, all of the computer analysis looking for any kind of trace of him at all. This is an extraordinarily puzzling development. And Jesse speculated a bit about what some range of the possibilities are that might explain his disappearance. Jesse made a reference to the fact that he thought that anybody who was planning to abduct him, would have been very smart and taken one of his pistols to make it appear as though maybe he took this to potentially commit suicide. But there really is not anywhere near adequate amount of evidence, extrinsic evidence, to suggest that a person of McCaslin's quality and character would be planning to commit suicide. I have speculated that he may, in fact, uh, just wish to have disappeared. That's for sure. I mean, that the fact that there is as little evidence, extrinsic evidence around about where he went or what happened to him means that it appears that he has been part of some sort of a plan, either unilateral plan on his part or a part of some collective plan to have him disappear, period. I do not want to speculate any farther than that. I know that Jesse has made reference to the fact that I have touched upon the existence of this association of extremely high level, now retired people who may well be, in fact, are engaged in the process of attempting to drag the information and the control over the levels of secrecy of the UFO program out from the hands of private aerospace corporations and this unit that was established by President Truman back in 1947, the so-called Majestic Group or Magic Group, their actual descendants, into the hands of actually responsible U.S. government officials, even though they're retired, but to try to do this. And Jesse was referencing my comments about this earlier, that it's conceivable that Mccasland would be part of that, and that he would be a very responsible person in the midst of such an association to make certain that this transition process of releasing this public information or releasing UFO information to the public was handled in a responsible way. That's objectively true. That doesn't increase the probability that that's the answer to what's going on with Mccasland. But his disappearance is genuinely mysterious, genuinely suspicious, and genuinely meriting a much deeper investigation. And the fact that the FBI and others have not been able to find any such information, even those who are not in the know, assuming that the level of the people that have been assigned to look for him in the FBI are not briefed in on, the deepest secrets that Mccasland possesses. They have been informed that he does possess some extremely important information, and therefore finding him is an important thing. But the bottom line is the Mccasland disappearance of all of the 11 is a genuinely mysterious event, and it will merit further discussion on our part. The other person, of course, is Monica Riza. Monica is one of the people of the 11 who does have some real connection to Mccasland, only in the fact that she was part of a program that was involved in developing special alloys, material alloys, in a company, in a corporation that in fact was involved in highly classified, way above top secret programs that were overseen technically by Mccasland. Okay, and that she is the one who helped develop. She and a co-scientist developed an alloy that was capable of extraordinarily high heat and was therefore useful in rocket engines and in reentry vehicles. But that's all that made it directly pertinent, really, to the oversight of Mccasland. There was nothing more directly involving Monica Risa in the UFO program and its reverse engineering. But there's one hint that Jesse did make, and that is that there is a metal that has been developed now by the United States, an alloy that has memory, that is able to move back into the form in which if it's crunched, which relates it very indirectly to the material that was recovered in the Roswell crash back in 1947. But it's not part of the research that was being done by Monica Riza. That's extremely important to point that out. And yet her disappearance is also very peculiar because she was hiking with two of her friends in the Angeles Mountains outside of Los Angeles, and she was only 30 feet behind them, and that they were in regular communication with her. They ended up all directing their attention back to the pathway and continuing to walk. And then within a matter of minutes, she was missing, and that there was no sign of her anywhere. There's no great ravines that she could have fallen into. They brought in sniff dogs. They brought in drones to look for her. They brought in ground search teams to look for her. They did find her hat, like a beanie, just like 400 yards. Well, they found the beanie down the pathway some, and they found the brim of the beanie like 400 feet off the path of the hike, which is strange. But her body was nowhere to be found. Now, as Jesse pointed out, this is mountain lion country up there, but there's no sign of any blood. There was no screaming. I mean, if she got attacked by a mountain lion, She would have been screaming. They would have heard her because she was close by. But there are no traces of any kind of an attack like that by a mountain lion. But her disappearance was totally peculiar. But the level of the peculiarity of her disappearance, doesn't increase the relevance of the particular work that she was doing to the UFO program, because it was along a completely different line, just dealing with other alloys, not examining the particular materials that of which the UFO craft were made up. She hadn't been given any of the information. There's no evidence of her being given any of the information relating to the materials that was recovered from the craft. But her disappearance is so strange that when it's linked to Mccasland with any linkage whatsoever to Mccasland, it's caused a pattern of two. But two do not make a real pattern. The third person that I think merits some further attention is this Matthew Sullivan. Now, but he died back in 2024. The communications that he was engaged in with Eric Burleson, Congressman Burleson, and with Dave Grush right at that time is of importance. He was an Air Force intelligence officer, very, very bright, very intelligent, and apparently did have some access to information relating to the UFO program. Because Eric Burleson was in conversation with him and David Grush was in conversation with him, he may well have realized that he was going to have to put up, if he was actually going to reveal anything, he was going to have to do it. And if he didn't have that much to reveal, he could have been embarrassed about it. But the fact of the matter is that Matthew Sullivan is, in fact, a person that bears some further investigation. Okay, and actually, Eric Burleson has called for that investigation. The FBI has promised they would. I personally don't have high levels of confidence in the FBI because they're so politicized, in their investigations. They've always been politicized in their investigations. It's unfortunate, but I mean, they began. It's important that people understand the FBI began back during the Palmer raids back in the 1920s. When the federal government was going after aliens and immigrants, considering all of them to be anarchists, because some of them were socialists, and they believed that people that were socialists, were and this was right after 1917, the rise of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, etc. And so people who came to the United States out of Eastern Europe and had been exposed to socialism were being branded by our federal government as anarchists, in a sense that they were opposing a capitalist economic system, and that made them an anarchist. That's how the FBI started, and that's where Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, got his chops actually in chasing people that were suspected of not being adequately loyal to the capitalist economic system. And he kept that particular ideology all throughout his career of 50 years, basically being in charge of the FBI. And so the FBI was poisoned at the root, in being political. And now, of course, it's even more so with Kash Patel now being, a complete political flunky, who's been put in charge of the FBI, that there's no trust there, that they will be manipulated politically. But the ostensible suicide of Matthew Sullivan does need to be further examined. And I'm sure that Eric Burleson's office is going to be capable of helping to conduct that. And there's one other person out of the 11 or 12 of the people that bears some further analysis, and that is Joshua LeBlanc. Joshua is a 29-year-old aerospace technologies engineer working on nuclear propulsion at NASA. He died on July 22nd of 2025 in this really bizarre crash of his Tesla outside of Huntsville, Alabama. It hit not only a guardrail, but several trees. So it must have been going at extraordinary speeds and burst into flames. And this very peculiar aspect of this death is that he was reportedly on his way to his office, but he left his phone and his wallet at home. And the recovery of the Tesla Sentry mode, the computer in the Tesla, showed that he had been parked at the Huntsville airport for roughly 4 hours on his way from home before he went to his office. And he was parked at the airport for like 4 hours that morning, which no one had any information on why he'd be doing that. And it's possible, one of the things that's possible, the Tesla with the computers that are there, is they can be hacked. And that could have caused this huge acceleration of his vehicle and out of his control and had him. But it's a very bizarre way to kill somebody, and there was no indication that he was involved in any attempt to do whistleblowing or anything. And the nuclear propulsion projects of NASA are not the most advanced because the technology that's been recovered from the UFOs is not a nuclear propulsion technology. And so therefore the particular area of his expertise at NASA was not the very cutting edge of UFO propulsion. So that would cut against it the other way. But that I could go through the long list of the other people and show you why each of them is not meriting that much attention as these four are out of the 12, actually. But I mean, we've got situations where where the person died of cardiovascular disease. This is Michael David Hicks. And he was, but his research was primarily on asteroid research. And the people get all het up over the fact that he was in the planetary defense mission, of NASA. But, it's not defense against UFO craft. It was defense against asteroids potentially hitting our planet, trying to figure out what to do about those. But as soon as people see, oh, planetary defense mission, maybe he was involved in the defense against UFOs. No, that's not true. And he died of cardiovascular disease. Nothing at all that's suspicious. Jason Thomas is another one. He drowned in a lake. He was a biologist and a pharmaceutical researcher. He was just doing research on experimental drugs, and he was very depressed. He had lost both of his parents, died within an hour of each other, just immediately before that. And he was caught on a camera earlier walking alongside railroad tracks, the thinking of potentially throwing himself on the railroad tracks. And then he went into a lake and drowned. According to his wife and family, he was struggling with mental health problems. So you get situations like that, and just because he was involved and had a government, but he had no government clearances, he had no security clearances for the kind of work he was working on, and yet he's being thrown into the pool with all these other four people. Same thing is true of Anthony Chavez. That he simply disappeared back in May of 2025 near his home in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Now he was 78 years old, and it was very puzzling because his wallet and his keys and his cigarettes were all left on the living room table, and his car was locked and sitting in the driveway. He had no particular. He did have a security clearance, uh, but that's all that the connection is. Okay. Now the same thing is true now with Amy Eskridge. Her name is. She it was from Huntsville, Alabama, which is where the Redstone Rocket Range is and stuff. Which is, but there's thousands of people that live in Huntsville. It doesn't make her, that important. But she was the daughter of Dr. Richard Eskridge, who was a top NASA aerospace engineer. And he was, in fact, working on gravity, an anti-gravity technology, and was allegedly pushing the boundaries of science. He had formed in his retirement, he had formed this thing called the Institute of Exotic Science with his daughter, Amy, but she was experiencing significant mental problems, they said. She'd been experiencing delusions, they said, and she'd been stopping some particular medication. Now we haven't found out yet what that is, but the if in fact people are on this medication for various kinds of psychotic uh, 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 maladies, let's say, if you shift from one particular pharmaceutical to another, sometimes they say right on the label, that it can bring on intense suicidal feelings, and that she was going through having all kinds of these strange experiences. Apparently, her parents both have said that they're terribly sad because she committed suicide, but she was going into things saying that there was important stuff she had to disclose. She was telling her friends that there was stuff that she needed to disclose, that she was being watched and targeted, but she wasn't on any kind of government contract or had access to any particular top secret information. But again, they're putting, Amy Eskridge into the mix. Same thing with Stephen Garcia. Stephen Garcia was a custodian of weapons, a weapons specialist in the Kansas City National Security Campus. That's the only reason he had a security clearance. But they were producing non-nuclear components in U.S. military weaponry, in nuclear weapons technology. They said that he had already been designated by his family as having mental problems. The family had moved to get him classified as being a danger to himself, if not to others, the 5150, and they were looking for him. And he was last seen holding a gun and walking around with a gun, and he's disappeared somewhere. But there's, again, these people are being tossed into these things. For example, Frank Malwad, Maiwald, Malwad. He did have certain government ties. He was a systems engineer at NASA, working at the JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and he worked on space flight instrumentation. But he was working on the infrared lens that was able to examine the atmosphere of exoplanets to determine whether there were signs of different types of chemicals in the atmosphere that might indicate that there were life on the other planets. But that's as close as it gets. There's no indication he committed suicide or that there was anything suspicious about his death, even though he was only 61 years old. And Nuno Loriero, Loureiro. He was a plasma scientist and a fusion a specialist at MIT. And he was shot and killed, by this guy Claudio Neves Valente, who's been arrested for it. And this is the guy. Valente is the same guy that shot and killed the people at Brown University, and it was a former classmate of his. And just because Nuno was a physicist working on plasma science, but he's killed by a former classmate of his, who's been arrested for it. This is not responsible activity on the part of the UFO community. I mean, there's enough real drama here for all of us, and a lot of important things to be investigated. We can't be squandering our credibility and our limited investigative resources trying to impose patterns on things that don't exist. We can continue to direct some attention to the four cases that I pointed out at the beginning of my comments here. This is obviously General Mccasland, Monica Risa, also Matthew Sullivan, and also Joshua LeBlanc, because there's weird stuff about their deaths, okay, or disappearances. But let's confine it to that, okay? I don't want people getting all heated up over, whoa, Danny is suggesting that we don't pay any attention to the other 8 people. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. If you're going to conduct investigations as we have for over 50 years, you have to know what to table and what to concentrate on, where there's potential information in there that's of importance. We've got to keep after it until we find Monica. She's somewhere, or her body is somewhere, and it can be found. Okay, and Mccasland can be found. I believe that Mccasland obviously intended to disappear. And I do not believe at this point that it's likely that he was planning to attempt suicide. He's disappeared somewhere, and there's a lot of somewhere to go to. It may have been as simple as the fact that he wanted to have a normal life, and he knew that things were going to get very non-normal, in the near future, with the revelation of all of the information that he knew all about UFO reverse engineering. And he must be in possession of information, about the contact that we had directly back in 1964 at the Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, face-to-face encounter with high-ranking U.S. Air Force officials, with an actual extraterrestrial being. Now, Mccasland must have known about that. Okay. And so that the question is, did he want to just have a normal life for the last 20 or 25 years of his life? He'd lived under this constant stress and anxiety for his whole professional career since graduating from the Air Force Academy. And he may have he may have decided to retire, really retire, and not be drawn back into what it was that he's anticipating is getting ready to happen in the immediate future. And he doesn't want to have to go through all that ordeal. He is going to have some difficulty concealing himself in his identity wherever he does go, but he could very well be on just some, Caribbean island somewhere, kicking back and taking it easy, and planning to have a calm and peaceful rest of his life. But we'll see. We'll see. Because the fact of the matter is, it's the Jason Bourne thing. It's the Jason Bourne thing with it. But, him gone to some little remote island. There are half a dozen major, high intrigue movies where at the very end, the main protagonist decides that his real option is to leave and leave the life. So let's keep an eye on the Mccasland stuff. Keep an eye on the Monica Risa stuff. Keep one eye on the thing with Matthew Sullivan, and figure out why Joshua LeBlanc was spending 4 hours at the airport before his car just accelerated at some clearly extraordinary speed to be hitting several trees. You got to be really traveling. Okay. So anyway, that's my take on the so-called 11 or 12 missing scientists. So let's try to be sound and responsible, and keep our focus on the things we need to work on, and get busy. If you haven't joined the Citizens for Disclosure, do it. Go to newparadigminstitute.org and sign up to be a member of the Citizens for Disclosure, and get those cards and documents into the hands of all of the candidates. The primaries are in process now, okay? And get them to sign. This is the point in time when they're going to be most disposed to signing those things. And any of those who don't, any of those who seek shelter and go, whoa, I'm really concerned about the national security revelations, I was say, fine for you. You don't sign this, we're going to tell everybody that you do not support a full disclosure of the UFO issue. And then you're going to cope with that. And we're going to do everything we can do to make sure you do have to cope with that, because all your constituents are going to be informed about it, and you're going to be asked about it over and over again at all town halls and every place that you appear. Okay? Until you come around on this thing. That's the story from the New Paradigm Institute, and from Full Disclosure. This is Dan Sheehan. I'll see you again next week.
To join the citizen movement for disclosure, visit newparadigminstitute.org/take action.